Hello worldwide web, I'm Dr. Shado, the universe and the here, and welcome to the grand finale of...
The Summer of Nicolas Cage!
Well, it's based on the fact that I'm recording this on the second to last day of summer, and crisis situation after crisis situation have been popping up. There's a good chance that it's going to be autumn by the time this goes up, but I can't just skip over this movie, Vampire's Kiss. An infamous little flick starring, you guessed it, Nicolas Cage, in one of his earliest roles back in 1988. However, if you think that means it's some forgotten relic, think again. As a good rule of thumb, if you've seen some random meme with Nicolas Cage floating about the internet, chances are it's from this movie. Though the memes really don't do a good job of explaining what the plot of the movie is. Nick stars as Peter Lowe, a New York businessman with the average life of a reasonably well-off young man in New York. He goes out drinking, goes over his woes with his psychiatrist, harasses the ever-loving fuck out of his favorite punching bag back at the office, and, oh yeah, he winds up in a situation where he gets bitten by a vampire and he slowly becomes one over the course of the running time as his sanity wanes. Or his sanity waning is what's actually going on, and the whole becoming a vampire thing is just tied into that. So, anyway, let's take a look at Vampire's Kiss and see for ourselves. After the opening credits remind us all, yep, that's New York all right, we jump right into introducing Peter Lowe, chatting it up with his psychiatrist, Dr. Glazer, played by Elizabeth Ashley. Well, time's up, so let's skip ahead to that night, where we see Peter and Jackie, played by Cassie Lemons. You know, Bernadette from Candyman. After a wonderful night of heavy drinking, they return to Peter's apartment to get down and dirty. But then, a shitty bat puppet flies in through the window! Reminding us all that, no, not all practical effects from the 80s are really that good. Thus, they must flee and finish their bonerific adventures elsewhere. This tale then moves on to his day at work, where we introduce another character and plot point, Alva Restrepo, played by Maria Conchita Alonso. You know, Leona from Predator 2, and Amber from The Running Man. Seems an old customer finally made a foreign sale and wants to frame his old contract from 1963, but oh darn it, Peter can't find it.
But I am asking you to go through the entire Der Spiegel file, because that is a very fat file and nothing is in order, and it will take hours, but it will be there.
You always hear about old plots for horror movies just don't work anymore with modern cell phones, but you never think about just how agonizing office work used to be before the introduction of network computers. So that's her task for the rest of the time, but spying a couple on the street, menacingly. We skip the rest of the workday to see Peter return home and find the bat has left. And we're back at the psychiatrist's office. Time is just about up, but there's something he'd like to get off his chest.
And suddenly this bat comes swooping down out of nowhere.
A bat?
Holy shit.
And I suddenly realized right then and there, I was put on this earth to fight crime.
I mean, I'm fighting this bat off all alone, and I'll be damned if I didn't get really turned on.
Oh. I have questions. Never mind that little detail. Time's up, gotta go. He's got Alva to demean and a nightlife to live. Peter is nothing if not an absolutely abhorrent asshole, so of course he's looking for a one-night stand, introducing us to Rachel, played by Jennifer Beals. He takes her home and... It turns out she's a frickin' vampire. Don't you just hate that? Lycanthropes and the Brides of Frankenstein I can handle, but vampires? They're just slightly less annoying than the vegans. This doesn't kill him, though. As a matter of fact, as he is drained, he seems to be in a sort of ecstasy. However, the next morning... he cuts himself shaving! Which can be pretty horrific, depending on how long it's been since he changed that blade. And his mental faculties are clearly a bit broken as he offers coffee to an empty bed. But later that day, he's still cognizant enough to visit the art gallery with Jackie.
Well, do you like it?
Gotta take a piss.
I'll just do it right there. Label it the latest Damien Hirst piece. You'll get millions. But he just walks out, leaving her high and dry. On the plus side, at least she knows how to tell someone that she's leaving.
Don't you ever call me again, you fuck! Fuck you!
You see, that's how you do it. Clear intent, straight and to the point. Not, oh, I'll just sneak out the back and hope that nobody gets too angry at me. No, fuck you, get fucked. You'd think maybe this would be something to talk to his shrink about, but Peter's more dismissive than usual. Dr. Glazier is still interested in getting to the bottom of that lustful bat battle he was telling her about last week, but he barely acknowledges it even happened, dismissing his own feelings outright.
I'd had a little to drink. I was a little drunk. Plus, I was horny.
Peter, that's great and all, but let's be real here. That's the baseline for you. That's all she's getting from him today, unlike poor Alva, who hasn't located the file yet, and thus he wants her to feel absolutely miserable about it, demanding that she stay in his office, as he calls their client, having to profusely apologize about her complete and utter lack of professionalism at such a dire time as this.
There is absolutely no rush on that. I know it's an old contract, it's going to take some digging, and I'm sure you and your girls got better things to do, huh?
So that's why he didn't put it on speaker.
Seems I didn't have to do a song and dance after all, Alba. As you could hear, I couldn't get a word in edgewise.
Because it is so much more difficult to psychologically torment someone, keeping them in a perpetual state of fear and dread, if they realize that reality doesn't exactly line up with what they're hearing from the officials. The tale Peter spins is that their client is fuming mad and will cancel their business agreements unless she finds the damn contract, and soon.
Am I getting through to you, Alba?
Right, I understand completely. I desperately need to find a new job. So while he orders her to work harder than she has ever worked before, he takes the rest of the day off so we can see him going even more mad, yelling at random people in the diner before gripping his wounded neck, caught in the throes of madness. He also stops at a payphone to call Jackie up. He might be crazy, but he's not stupid and knows he's screwed up big time there. She's apprehensive, but begrudgingly agrees to give him one more chance, saying they'll meet up at 9 o'clock that night. But something is keeping Peter from leaving. It's time for their date. But
he is wondering, how did she get in here? And he is realizing that he let her in.
It's not that odd. Anything can be hiding just out of frame. Yo. So he never does go on that date, instead staying home to get sucked off. Oh, well, that means Jackie has double broken up with him, meaning his options for women to make miserable are narrowing.
There you are!
But hey, what's the point of even having a position of authority if you're not going to abuse it? Chasing Alva down like a madman, he follows her into the ladies' room, cornering her. I mean, there are witnesses, but they just leave. Fortunately, hearing she has a gun, he almost comes to his senses, but after such a disgusting act, terrorizing a young woman in the office, how will his bosses react?
Nothing like a little office trauma to keep things interesting.
Oh, they just yuck it up. Oh, one of the guys is losing his marbles and making like absolute hell for a young woman. Ha! Now that's entertainment. Confirming once again that high school never ends, Peter returns home to find that, yep, Jackie broke up with him for the second time this week, and that's just too much. He wrecks the place, smashing mirrors and glass and destroying everything. No surprises here, they had to get this in one take. Well, best thing he can do at this point is to go to the psychiatrist, though it seems Peter has a very different opinion as to exactly what is going wrong with his life. Alva being so damn incompetent as to not be able to find that file. Dr. Glazier says that simple task might be made more difficult if it was misfiled, but Peter shoots her down. Filing is simple, it's all done alphabetically.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G,
Peter.
H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P,
Peter.
Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z.
Oh, great, now I'm just imagining an alternate universe where Nicolas Cage stars in Kindergarten Cop. Establishing that Peter has never misfiled a single document in his entire life. He demands to know who did. But, of course, the doctor has no way of knowing that kind of stuff, so he laughs at her credentials. Before we move back on to work, it's 5 o'clock, so Alva is heading home, but Peter isn't going to allow that. She must work overtime. Her and only her.
I couldn't think of a more horrible job if I wanted to. And you have to do it. You have to, or I'll fire you. Do you understand?
It really makes you wonder why, after being forced to work remotely, now that offices are opening back up, office workers are not really in that big of a rush to go right back into office culture. So, SSDD. Not that there's nothing going on. Peter's affliction is draining into his psyche, much as his mistress is draining his very life force. This is driving him to behave less human as time goes on, and we see a little homage to Renfield in a scene that Cage thought up for this flick, allegedly doing 3 times just to get it right. Hi, I'm Nicolas Cage, and this is Jackass. But what's this? Alva has called in sick to work today. Only one thing to do then. Dig through the Rolodex for her address and show up at her window. This is just about as creepy as it gets, but don't worry, he's very soft-spoken here, saying that he was wrong to demand so much of her. The contract doesn't even matter that much anyway. They can call a truce and she can come back to work. But of course, once they're in the car, he reveals that the contract not mattering much doesn't mean it doesn't matter at all, and she will find it, even if it kills her.
The goddamn contract is somewhere in the goddamn fucking files!
You know what the best part is, though? The contract really doesn't fucking matter at all. Not just because the guy who wants it said, don't rush, it's no big deal, but also it doesn't change anything in the dynamics between Alva and Peter. He's just a crazy asshole. That's all he's ever been, that's all he's ever gonna be. So, hey, gotta stop and have a chat with my brother for a second. Emilio, played by Robert Lujan. Seems Alva doesn't feel safe, and yeah, she does have a gun, but she doesn't carry any rounds for it and needs some now.
He scared them off with blanks. That's all he has here, Alva, is blanks, you know?
Okay, then give me the fucking blanks.
Well, that's pretty much all they're supposed to have on set on any movie. So she gets her blanks and gets back in the car and back to her hellish job under her crazy boss. And yeah, that's not an exaggeration, as Peter now believes he can't even see himself in the mirror anymore.
Where am I?
You're in the goddamn crapper hole, and I'm trying to take a dump, so either shut up and leave the goddamn acting lessons for home or go back to the ladies' room.
But if you expect anyone to be put off by that odd behavior, you gotta remember this is in New York. Utterly distraught at his transformation into a creature of the night, he locks himself away. But what's this? Alva has found the contract. Just one problem.
It's just too late, Alva.
Why is it too late?
Oh, it's got nothing to do with the client. There wasn't even anything remotely close to a deadline for this. It's just, at this point of the movie, Peter has become a danger to himself and others. So she must run! Peter feverishly chases her down. Downstairs, down corridors, and finally cornered. She pulls her gun, but he wants her to shoot him.
I swear to God I will!
Alva, do it or I'll fire you. Do you understand unemployment? Can you live with that?
Kill my boss! Do I dare live out the American dream?
Don't rape me.
Well, that came out of nowhere.
Rape you? I will.
Well, this piece of shit just goes right for it. Because that's a comfortable topic for a horror comedy.
Shoot. Not the floor, Alva. Me!
Geez, some employees never seem to be able to follow even the simplest instructions. She ends up unloading 5 blanks into the floor, further infuriating Peter, who then... that happens. As serious of a topic as it is, for some reason it's presented very clean and just gotten over with real quick. So much so that I wasn't even sure if it even happened. You might be asking, hey, Decker, how the hell could you be confused as to whether or not that happened? Well, for one thing, both parties had their pants firmly on for the whole 14 seconds of it. On the plus side, that means it's over and done with quickly, and we see from Peter's perspective, Alva has transformed into Rachel, but more importantly, there's still that gun. Maybe he can put it to good use. Okay, first of all, that is now 7 shots out of this revolver. But second, even blanks would kill the shit out of you if you stick the barrel in your mouth and pull the trigger. All those gases exploding that would be enough to push a bullet going into your brains. You die. My guess is they used caps for this scene. But this must mean that Peter's fears have been realized. If he can't kill himself with a gun, it must be because he has turned into a vampire.
I'm a vampire! 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 I'm a vampire!
And just like real life, nobody gives a fuck. Thus he wrecks his place even more, turning his apartment into his vampiric lair. His couch now flipped up for a poor man's coffin bed. He complains to Rachel about being hungry, and she just tells him he knows what to do. But that's gonna be tough, what with his relatively blunt canines. So, heading to the local costume shop for some proper vampire fangs, he finds a nice set. But it's a bit out of his range.
I got some cheapy. Plastic ones. They're only $3.50.
Cheapy.
Hey, geez, the real horror, the prices in New York. Now equipped with his vampire starter gear, he calls up his psychiatrist because, hey, maybe he could come down a bit earlier for his next appointment. Not feeling quite all there at the moment. But first, dinner. Okay, now I'm just wondering what kind of gastrointestinal problems this man is getting and why they haven't killed him yet. But that night is the night that he is going to finally become the vampire he knows he can. Beating his way into the front of the line of the club, he slinks into the extremely crowded dance floor and somehow finds an incredibly convenient woman all alone in what I can only guess is the unpopular corner of the establishment. She thinks his little vampire act is silly, up until he pins her down, biting into her neck and violently drinking her blood until she is dead. I was about to say, those party favors aren't that damn dangerous. Drinking all that blood makes him feel a bit off, and who would happen to show up but Rachel to chastise him for his foolishness. He says he's a super cool, kick-ass vampire, just like her, but she is done with him.
You are with me.
Well, it doesn't look like it. Does it, Donald?
No.
So that means this whole relationship with Rachel was all in his head. Or maybe not, as there are still some things that are a little iffy. Distraught, he accosts Rachel and her boyfriend, but she barely even knows him, and he screams that she's a vampire, only get him dragged out of the club, and oddly cool glances from Rachel and Donald. Well, we got like 15 minutes of movie left, so I gotta wrap this shit up. So, Alva tells her brother about the horrible things that Peter did to her, while Peter is off losing his mind even more, asking random passerby to help kill his vampire ass. But, oh yeah, that's right, he was supposed to see his therapist this morning.
Say, I forgot. Where did we leave off?
Well, Peter, you wanted very much to make an earlier appointment, so what's up?
What's up? Ooh, how much time you got? Peter goes about his final psychiatric visit completely psychologically, imagining a hypothetical conversation where he stands stoically, stake in hand, talking about how he's got himself all figured out. He doesn't need therapy, he needs love. But hey, wouldn't you know it, imaginary Dr. Glaser agrees with Peter wholeheartedly, and it just so happens she knows the perfect woman for Peter, the very one who is coming in for the following appointment. And yes, they like the same things, they hate the same things, and they truly hit it off in record time.
Incredible. Well.
While back in reality, Peter is considerably less suave. Not to say he's exactly who you'd want to bring home to the family, even in his delusional fantasies.
I did rape someone a couple nights ago.
And yes, I am judging imaginary Dr. Glaser for not taking the opportunity to immediately call the imaginary police.
Well, the fact is I did murder someone last night. I turned into a vampire. It's a long story.
Goodness.
Now watch, it's only going to be a deal breaker when he brings up his Yu-Gi-Oh collection. Dr. Glaser says, it's cool, people die all the time, everything's fine, just go off and be lovey-dovey with your new lovey-dove. But on his way home, Emilio and Alva spot him.
Sharon.
God damn it! What I just say!
And I guess if his last imaginary relationship failed, things weren't going to be looking too great on the rebound. So he's good and depressed by the time Emilio finds him, and he begs to have the stake driven through his heart. And he does. The end? Oh, that was abrupt. Yeah, this man lost his mind and died. Well, that was Vampire's Kiss. I can see why it has a cult following. And why it also, on the same hand, is considered kind of meh. It's got a unique charm to it, I'll give it that. Vampire's Kiss is an absolute showcase for Nicolas Cage's over-the-top sanity not included style, and itself actually an interesting look at a man's gradual loss of sanity, his journey from being an asshole to a delusional despot, completely out of his mind in a way that leaves just enough open as to ask the question, did he imagine it all, or was at least some of it real? And he clearly imagined quite a lot of it, but there's enough wiggle room that I figure the film theorists should do a 3-part episode on this movie alone. But the plot really isn't the point of the movie anyway, it's more the experience. In that regard, Vampire's Kiss is certainly memorable, with quotable lines, memorable shots, and a pace that works well in the movie for how it makes you feel, not so much what it all means. Like Peter, Alva, and the contract. That really had nothing to do with his psychosis, vampirism, any overreaching deal of any import. But it was the very framework to show the breakdown of Peter's humanity, and in that regard, the subplot made a huge impact on how the film as a whole feels. At the end of the day, Vampire's Kiss is a cult movie. No, not like Mandy, the metaphorical kind. It's not your standard Hollywood tale of a hero's journey, or happy endings, or really much of a satisfying ending at all, come to think of it. But it is a journey, and the audience is coming along for the ride. You're not going to walk away from this thinking about a million twists or wondering what it all means for very long, but it will be a movie you remember, and maybe even want to experience again when it strikes your fancy. Coming in at 3 frugal fantasy fangs out of 5. I mean, it ain't a masterpiece, but I wouldn't go so far as to say it's bad. It's just weird as hell. Thank you all for watching. I've been Shado. And remember, before you go off thinking that a relationship with a vampire would be oh so sexy, just keep in mind, they are technically corpses. Okay?
I was in Mortal Kombat with a fucking bat. Give me a break.